The dim light of the hospital room cast long shadows on the cracked walls. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound, a mechanical rhythm that felt too loud in the stillness. Olivia Reed sat beside her mother, Ellie, who lay motionless in the bed, her body trapped in a world of silence and stillness. The doctors had long ago given up hope. A vegetative state, they'd called it. No signs of recovery. But Olivia refused to believe them. She couldn't, let go of the woman who had been her world. Her small hand was clasped tightly in her mother's. Olivia could feel the faint warmth of her skin, the only comfort in a room that had become a prison. Her mother's hair, once golden and thick, now lay limp against the pillow, the strands too thin and brittle to hold any shine. Olivia had always known her mother as vibrant, full of life, and even in this silent state, Ellie's presence seemed to demand the space around her. But today, everything was changing. The door to the room creaked open, and Olivia's heart skipped. She didn't need to turn around to know who was entering. The air seemed to grow colder the moment Victoria Reed, her aunt, stepped inside. Victoria was tall, with sharp features and an air of authority that always made Olivia feel small in comparison. She had never liked Victoria, not since she was a child, but now, as the woman walked toward the bed with her hands clasped in front of her, Olivia could feel something darker in the air. Olivia, Victoria's voice was smooth, too smooth, as if it had been rehearsed. It's time to let go. Olivia's grip tightened on her mother's hand. No. She's not dead, Aunt Victoria. She's just asleep. Victoria's lips curled into a thin, emotionless smile. Asleep, you say? You're wasting your time, child. Ellie's brain activity is non-existent. She hasn't shown any response in months. The doctor said she's gone. She's not coming back. The words felt like a slap to Olivia's face. No. She's still in there. I know she is. Victoria took a slow, deliberate step forward, her heels clicking on the floor with a sound that felt like a warning. You need to understand, Olivia, she said, her voice lowering with cold finality, I'm in charge now. I'm your guardian. And I'm making the decision. Her eyes flicked to the bed, then back to Olivia. Ellie's dead. And I'm having her cremated. It's time to move on. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Her mother, her only family, was going to be taken away. No, she whispered, barely able to breathe. You can't do that. I won't let you. Victoria's gaze hardened. You don't have a choice in the matter. If you keep resisting me, I'll send you to an orphanage. You'll be just another child lost in the system. The words were cruel, biting, but they weren't what sent Olivia's heart into a tailspin. It was the next thing Victoria said, so casually, so matter-of-factly, that it left Olivia frozen. You're not even a true Reed, Victoria said, as though she were talking about the weather. You were switched at birth. My real niece died that day, and Ellie, your mother, took the wrong child. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. What? What are you talking about? She stammered, shaking her head. No. No, that's not true. Victoria's lips pressed together in a thin line. Oh, it's true. I was there. I saw it happen. Your real mother died, and Ellie, she took you, swapped you with her own. The doctors, they were too afraid to speak up. They let her keep you. But you're not a Reed. You never were. The world around Olivia seemed to tilt, her mind struggling to catch up. The truth hit her like a wave, crashing through the fragile defenses she had built around herself. Her whole life, everything she thought she knew about herself, was a lie. Before she could respond, the door swung open again, and two men in dark suits stepped into the room. They were large, their presence looming over Olivia like a storm cloud. One of them reached for Ellie's bed, preparing to wheel her out. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. No, she cried, her voice cracking as she stood up, stumbling toward the men. Please, you can't, she's my mother. She's not dead. The men didn't even look at her. They moved with efficiency, as though they had done this 1,000 times before. The one closest to Ellie's bed pushed the four-stand, ready to transport her, while the other grabbed Olivia's arm, forcing her back. No. Olivia screamed, her small fists pounding against the man's chest. I won't let you take her. I won't let you. Victoria stood silently, watching her niece with a cold, calculating look in her eyes. You're wasting your time, Olivia. The papers are already signed. Ellie's cremation is happening today, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. The man who held Olivia gently but firmly pushed her aside. Come with us, child. You're going to the orphanage now. Your mother is gone. You need to accept that. Olivia felt tears well up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wasn't going to let them take her mother. She wasn't going to let Victoria win. Just as the man made to pull her away, something strange happened. A voice, soft and hushed, echoed in the room. It was coming from nowhere, yet it felt so close, so real. You need to listen, the voice said. Olivia froze, her eyes darting around the room. Was she imagining things? She turned her head quickly, scanning the space, her breath quickening. The voice spoke again, more insistent now. Olivia, it said, I am the nightstand. And I have information for you. Olivia's gaze snapped to the nightstand beside her mother's bed. It was a plain piece of furniture, with a chipped surface and a single drawer. Nothing special. But the voice. It was coming from there. Her mouth went dry. What? Who? I am your true father's messenger. You're not alone, Olivia. Your real father is out there. His name is Alexander Vance. He's the richest man in China. And he's coming for you. Olivia blinked, as though the world had just been ripped from her hands and she was floating in a sea of confusion. My father? But, how? Before she could process the words, the man who had been holding her arm yanked her away, and the door to the room slammed shut behind them. She had no idea what was happening. But one thing was clear, something had changed. Her life, which had always felt like a cage, suddenly felt like it was on the verge of exploding with possibility. As she was pulled out of the room and down the hallway, the voice of the nightstand still echoed in her ears, and Olivia felt, for the first time in her life, a spark of hope. Her real father was coming for her. And no matter what it took, she would find him. She would get her mother back. The towering gates of the Vance estate loomed ahead like something out of a dream, impossibly grand, with walls that seemed to stretch far into the horizon, dotted with ancient statues and trimmed hedges that were meticulously maintained. Olivia had never seen anything like it. Everything around her screamed wealth, power, and perfection, things she could never have imagined in her wildest fantasies. She had been in the backseat of the limousine for what felt like hours. The sound of the engine's low hum vibrated through her chest, but it did little to settle the roiling storm inside her. Her mother, Ellie, lay beside her, still unconscious, wrapped in blankets. Olivia had to steal glances at her mother, just to remind herself that she was still there, still alive. Still, the truth of the situation hadn't fully sunk in. A voice, the voice of the nightstand, had told her that Alexander Vance was her real father. But what did that even mean? The world she was entering was so far beyond her comprehension, so foreign, she felt like an intruder. How could she, a small, terrified girl from a dilapidated house, possibly belong to a billionaire? To a man like Alexander Vance, but the moment she thought about her Aunt Victoria's cruel words, the fear and doubt intensified. The woman had already lied, manipulating the truth at every turn. Had she been lying about her mother's death, too? Had she been lying about Olivia's true heritage? The car finally rolled to a stop in front of the Vance mansion. Olivia swallowed hard as she looked out the tinted window, trying to make sense of everything. Her heartbeat was loud in her ears. Her hands were clammy. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever was about to happen. A tall woman, dressed in a pristine, white suit, stepped forward to greet them. She had short black hair and sharp features, the kind of elegance that made you feel like you were standing in the presence of royalty. This was Helena, Alexander's grandmother. Olivia remembered the name. She was the one who had taken them in after Helena had witnessed Olivia's brave actions in helping an elderly woman earlier in the day. Helena was kind in a way that made Olivia feel safe. She'd taken them both in, without asking questions. But now, with the looming mansion behind her, the woman seemed more like a figurehead than a comforting presence. Welcome to the Vance estate, Helena said with a warm smile, though her eyes held a sadness Olivia couldn't quite place. I know this is overwhelming, but we'll make sure you're taken care of. Helena's gentle words did little to ease the knots in Olivia's stomach. She couldn't stop thinking about the nightstand's cryptic message. Alexander Vance, the richest man in China. Her father. But if he was really her father, why had he never come for her? Why hadn't he known she existed? Before Olivia could voice any of the questions spinning in her head, the door to the mansion opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, with sharp features that were almost too perfect, like a sculpture brought to life. His dark hair was cut neatly at the sides, and his eyes, though kind, held an intensity that reminded Olivia of the weight of the world. This was Alexander Vance. The man she was supposed to call father. But how could he be her father? He was a stranger, a person who didn't even know her name, let alone her story. Olivia's heart thudded harder as she clutched her mother's hand, knowing, deep down, that everything would change in an instant. Helena, Alexander's voice was deep, rich, and full of authority. I'm glad you could bring them here. Helena gave him a soft nod, but before she could say anything more, Alexander's gaze shifted, landing on Olivia and her mother. He paused, as if weighing them, before slowly walking toward them. Is this her? His voice was quieter now, almost hesitant. Olivia couldn't bring herself to answer. She just stared at him, her breath catching in her throat. There was something about him, something that made her feel both drawn to him and terrified of him at the same time. This is Olivia, Helena said, her voice gentle but firm. She's the one you've been searching for. Olivia barely registered the words. She was too caught up in the way Alexander was looking at her. His eyes softened, but there was a shadow there, a faint trace of regret, as if he was seeing something he had never wanted to see. Olivia, he murmured, stepping closer, his expression unreadable. I don't know what to say. You didn't know I existed, Olivia said, her voice small but sharp with the sting of truth. The words came out before she could stop them. They hung in the air, thick with meaning. She wasn't sure if she was speaking to Alexander or to herself. He blinked, caught off guard by her directness. Then, slowly, he reached out, placing his hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his voice thick with something Olivia couldn't quite place. I'm sorry for everything you've gone through. She stared at him, her body tense. If you're my father, why didn't you come for me? Her voice cracked, the pain of years of abandonment rushing to the surface. Why didn't you save me and my mother? He didn't answer right away. He looked at her as if he was seeing her for the first time, as if the words were too heavy to speak. He lowered his hand from her shoulder, but the weight of his gaze lingered. Helena stepped forward, cutting through the awkward silence. I've already explained the situation to Alexander. Your mother. She faltered, as though the words were hard to say. Your mother did everything she could for you, Olivia. And now? We must find a way to make things right. Olivia felt a pang in her chest. Her mother was still so far away, still caught in the limbo of her coma. She didn't know if Ellie would ever wake up. But for the first time, she felt something like hope, or maybe just the illusion of it. Alexander Vance was here. And maybe, just maybe, he could help her save her mother. But before Olivia could speak, the front door of the mansion opened again, and a woman stepped outside. She was tall, with long, dark hair and an air of superiority. Olivia's heart sank when she recognized her. Mia. Victoria had been right. The girl in front of her was the one Alexander had accepted as his daughter. Mia looked just like she belonged here, her confident posture, the way she held herself with a kind of casual arrogance that Olivia didn't know how to imitate. Mia's eyes flicked over to Olivia, and for a brief moment, there was a spark of something dark in her gaze, something possessive, almost territorial. Father, Mia said, her voice like honey, but with a hidden edge. She walked toward them, as if she was the one who had been expected, not Olivia. She glanced at Olivia with a dismissive smile before turning her attention back to Alexander. You're going to announce me as your heir soon, aren't you? She asked, her voice full of expectation. Alexander hesitated, his brow furrowing, but he nodded. Yes, Mia. The time has come. Mia's smile widened. But when she looked at Olivia again, there was something cold in her expression, something that made Olivia's stomach churn. You're going to like it here, Mia said sweetly, though her eyes were sharp. I'm sure we'll be great. Sisters. Olivia felt the words, though soft, like a warning. The truth of the situation began to settle in. Mia was not just Alexander's daughter. She had claimed that title long ago, and Olivia was an outsider, an interloper. She was the one who didn't belong. But no matter what, Olivia would not let herself be pushed aside. She had already fought too hard to be here. She had already lost too much. And she wasn't about to lose her mother, or herself, again. The Vance estate felt like a fortress, a glittering tower of glass and steel rising high above the surrounding landscape, its cold, sterile beauty unmatched by anything Olivia had ever known. She couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong here. The mansion's marble floors echoed beneath her feet like distant thunder, and the air inside was impossibly pristine, almost too clean, as though nothing in this place could ever get dirty, nothing could ever feel real. Helena had led her to a small guest room, where Olivia and her mother would stay temporarily. It was furnished simply, though the richness of the room was evident in the soft, velvety curtains and the fine linens on the bed. But Olivia couldn't relax. Not yet. Not until her mother woke up. Ellie's silence felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Her mother had always been her rock, the one constant in her world. But now, Ellie was lost in a coma, and Olivia felt like a ship adrift on a vast, empty sea. Everything was unfamiliar. Everything was changing. The only thing that hadn't changed was her love for her mother, and the fierce desire to protect her. But something inside Olivia wouldn't let her rest. She knew she couldn't just sit around in a guest room, waiting for things to get better on their own. There had to be more she could do. She had to find answers, not just for herself, but for Ellie. The mansion was filled with people she didn't know, strange faces in suits and expensive dresses, moving about like ghosts. But none of them seemed to care about her. None of them seemed to notice the girl who had once lived in a cramped, old house, fighting every day to stay alive. Here, she was just another unknown, lost in the sea of opulence. It was late when Olivia finally decided to slip away. She needed fresh air. She needed space. The mansion's vast garden stretched out before her like an untouched paradise. She found a small door at the back of the house, leading out to the manicured grounds. The cool night air hit her face, sharp and invigorating. She needed to clear her head, to think. But as she wandered farther from the house, her thoughts were interrupted by a faint, strained sound. It was a soft cry, barely audible, but there was no mistaking the desperation in it. Olivia's heart skipped a beat, her instincts kicking in. She rushed toward the noise, pushing through the tall hedges and overgrown bushes, until she found the source. A small woman was lying in the grass, her frail body trembling, one hand clutching her chest. Olivia recognized her instantly. It was Helena, the very woman who had taken her in, who had promised to help her. But now, she was on the ground, gasping for breath. "Helena!" Olivia cried, rushing to her side. She knelt beside her, feeling the woman's uneven breathing against her palm. "What's happening? What do I do?" Helena's eyes fluttered open, her face pale and drawn. I'm fine," she wheezed, trying to sit up, but the effort left her gasping for air. "It's just, my heart, it's been acting up lately. I've been too stubborn to admit it." Olivia's mind raced. She wasn't a doctor, she didn't know what to do. But she couldn't just stand there. Not with someone who had been so kind to her. "No. You need help," Olivia insisted, her voice shaking. "I'll get someone. I'll get a doctor." But Helena shook her head weakly, her eyes locking onto Olivia's with a sense of urgency. No time, Olivia's panic only deepened. She didn't know what to do, but she couldn't leave Helena like this. She had to do something. "Just breathe. Stay calm," Olivia urged, even though her own heart was pounding in her chest. "I'll help you. Please, don't give up." Helena's eyes softened, and she reached up to grip Olivia's hand with surprising strength. You've got a heart of gold, Olivia. I can see why your mother loves you so much." The praise hit Olivia like a punch to the gut. She'd always been the quiet, overlooked one, never the center of attention. But here, in this moment, she felt seen, truly seen, for the first time. And it felt like the world had stopped spinning, just long enough for her to catch her breath. But the moment was shattered by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. Olivia turned her head, panic rising in her chest, just as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Alexander. His sharp eyes scanned the scene before him, quickly assessing the situation. "What happened?" he asked, his voice firm but tinged with concern. Olivia stood, backing away instinctively as she felt the pressure of his gaze. But Helena was still clutching her hand, as if she were anchoring Olivia to the moment. I'm fine," Helena gasped, still struggling to breathe. "It's just, my heart." Alexander didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone and quickly dialed, his voice commanding as he spoke to the emergency services. "Get a doctor here now," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. As he spoke to the operator, Olivia couldn't shake the sense of inadequacy that had settled in her chest. She wasn't strong enough to help. She wasn't enough. The reality of her situation hit her like a freight train. She didn't belong in this world. She didn't belong with these people. When Alexander finished the call, he looked at Olivia, his face a mask of unreadable emotion. "You did the right thing, bringing her outside. You're resourceful." The compliment made Olivia feel uneasy, like she had done something wrong despite everything. She didn't want to be seen as resourceful. She didn't want to be seen as the girl who had to save everyone. She just wanted her mother. She just wanted answers. But Alexander wasn't finished. His eyes darkened, and he looked down at the woman in the grass, his face softening with a rare vulnerability. "Helena," he said quietly, his voice low, "you shouldn't have tried to hide this from me." Helena closed her eyes, her grip on Olivia's hand loosening as she relaxed against the grass. "I didn't want to burden you," she whispered, her voice fading. Olivia felt a pang of guilt that she hadn't known the full extent of Helena's suffering. She had only been focused on herself, on finding her mother, on proving she wasn't just another lost child. She hadn't considered the weight others carried. Before she could speak, the doctor arrived, followed closely by 2 staff members. They hurried to Helena's side, their hands working quickly as they assessed the situation. Olivia stood to the side, her heart still hammering in her chest. She felt invisible again, like nothing more than a spectator in a world that wasn't hers. It wasn't until they had helped Helena back inside that Alexander turned to Olivia, his expression hardening with a sudden, cold resolve. "Olivia," he said, his voice commanding. "You don't belong here. I don't know who you are, or why you think you have any place in my family's life, but you're a distraction. I have enough problems to deal with without." His words hit Olivia like a slap. The sting of rejection was almost physical. She had already felt the isolation when he first looked at her, but now, hearing him say it aloud, confirmed everything. She wasn't his daughter. She never would be. "You think I'm a distraction?" Olivia choked out, her voice raw with emotion. "I'm your daughter. And I'm not going anywhere." His eyes narrowed, but something flickered in his gaze, something deeper than anger. Something that looked almost like regret. But he didn't soften. "You don't belong here," he repeated coldly. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Olivia standing in the garden, the weight of his rejection pressing down on her chest. The next few days in the Vance mansion felt like a strange, unsettling dream. Everything was too clean, too perfect, as though the house itself was a stage set, waiting for something, someone, to break it all apart. Olivia had no place here. Not really. No matter how many times Helena insisted she was welcome, no matter how many servants nodded politely as they passed her in the halls, the mansion felt like a cage built from golden marble. The walls were too high, the floors too smooth, and no matter how hard Olivia tried, she couldn't escape the feeling that everything around her was just a well-orchestrated illusion. She spent most of her days in the guest room with Ellie, unable to leave her mother's side. There were moments when Olivia would sneak into the vast garden or take a walk around the mansion, but each time, she felt like she was being watched, like she didn't belong. The Vance family had welcomed her only out of a sense of obligation, not love. They didn't owe her anything. They didn't want her here. But it wasn't just the mansion that made her feel like an outsider. It was Alexander. Despite everything, despite the harsh words he'd spoken to her in the garden, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She couldn't stop wondering why he'd seemed so distant, so guarded. There were moments when his eyes would linger on her, just for a second too long, and for a split second, Olivia thought he might be on the verge of saying something that would explain everything. But then, just as quickly, the moment would pass, and he would retreat into his world, leaving Olivia to feel more lost than ever. One afternoon, as she sat beside Ellie's bed, staring out the window, she heard a soft knock on the door. She turned to find Helena standing in the doorway, a quiet concern in her eyes. "Olivia," Helena said gently, stepping into the room. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Olivia nodded, her hands gripping her mother's, her heart skipping a beat. "Of course." Helena hesitated before sitting beside her on the edge of the bed. "I know this isn't easy for you," she began, her voice filled with warmth. "Being here. It's a lot to take in, I understand. Olivia swallowed hard, her throat dry. I'm fine, she said, though the words felt like a lie. I'm just worried about my mom. Helena placed a hand on Olivia's shoulder, her touch surprisingly comforting. I know. But sometimes it helps to take a step back. To think about the bigger picture. Olivia frowned, confusion flashing across her face. What do you mean? Helena's gaze softened, and for the first time, Olivia saw a flicker of something behind her grandmotherly warmth, something darker, something more thoughtful. I've been thinking about what you told me. About your mother. About Alexander. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Helena glanced around the room, ensuring no one else was listening, before leaning closer. I think you should know something. Something important. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. What is it? Helena paused, her lips pressing together as though she were carefully weighing her next words. There are things about Alexander's past, things he's never shared with anyone. Things that I'm not sure he even remembers. Olivia sat up straighter, her pulse quickening. What kind of things? Helena hesitated again before speaking, her voice low and full of caution. I've always known there was something off about how things unfolded when your mother and father were younger. Alexander never told anyone this, but he was involved with someone else before your mother. A woman named Naomi. Olivia blinked, trying to keep up. Who's Naomi? Helena's eyes flickered briefly with sadness. She was the woman Alexander was supposed to marry. Naomi was the woman he loved, long before your mother came into his life. But Naomi disappeared, just before everything changed. Olivia's mind was racing. Disappeared? What do you mean? Helena's gaze dropped to the floor, as though she was seeing the past play out in front of her eyes. Naomi was never heard from again. It's as if she vanished without a trace. No one knew what happened to her. Alexander. He couldn't accept it. He blamed himself, I think. And then, just a few months later, Ellie came into the picture. Your mother was different. She wasn't like anyone Alexander had known. And soon after, they became involved. Olivia's heart was pounding. But why didn't he tell me this? Why hasn't he ever mentioned Naomi? Helena's eyes met hers, her expression serious. Because, my dear, Naomi's disappearance is tied to everything. Alexander's world, everything he built, was shaped by the loss of her. He buried it all, his guilt, his grief, and focused on moving forward. But when Ellie arrived, he never told her about Naomi. He never told anyone. It was as if Naomi never existed. But I think you need to know the truth, Olivia. If you're going to understand who Alexander really is, you have to understand his past. The weight of Helena's words settled heavily on Olivia's shoulders. She was learning that the man she had been told was her father wasn't the man she thought he was. He was complicated. He was filled with secrets, grief, and guilt that stretched far back into his history. Do you think Naomi has something to do with my mother? Olivia asked, her voice trembling with the rawness of the question. Is she the reason Ellie's in a coma? Is she the reason I'm here instead of somewhere else? Helena didn't answer immediately. Her eyes seemed lost in thought, the years of experience weighing heavily on her. I'm not sure, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. But I think you need to be careful. Alexander is a man who's hiding more than he lets on. And if you're going to fight for your place here, you need to be prepared for the truth, even if it's not what you want to hear. Olivia sat in stunned silence, her mind whirling. This was more than she had bargained for. This wasn't just about finding her mother or uncovering the truth about her family. This was about a past she couldn't possibly understand, a web of lies and guilt that went far deeper than she had ever imagined. But the one thing that stood clear above everything else was the realization that no matter how complicated things got, Olivia would not back down. She couldn't. Her mother was still fighting for her life. And if she was going to have any chance of saving her, she would have to confront the truth about her father, and everything that had come before her. Helena stood slowly, brushing off the dust from her skirt. Think about it, Olivia. What you choose to do with this information is up to you. But remember, if you want to understand Alexander, if you want to change things for the better, you have to face the truth. All of it. Olivia nodded, the weight of Helena's words sinking in. The world around her was a puzzle, a maze of secrets, lies, and half-truths. And somewhere in the middle of it all was a man she had once thought was the answer to everything. But now, she wasn't so sure. Alexander Vance was hiding something. And Olivia was going to find out what it was, no matter what it took. The grand ballroom of the Vance estate shimmered with opulence, its towering chandeliers casting a golden glow over the gathering of well-dressed guests. Music played softly in the background, a string quartet adding to the sophisticated ambience. Everywhere Olivia looked, there was wealth, polished marble floors, crystal glasses that caught the light, the soft murmur of hushed conversations between some of the most influential people in the world. And at the center of it all, at the top of the grand staircase, was Alexander Vance, surrounded by his entourage, as he prepared to make one of the most important announcements of his life. Olivia stood at the far edge of the ballroom, hidden behind a thick column, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and dread. She had never been in a place like this before. The air felt thick with the weight of expectation. She was supposed to be part of this world now, a world that she was still struggling to understand. But despite the gilded beauty of the event, Olivia felt completely out of place, like a ghost that had wandered into a world it didn't belong in. Ellie, her mother, was still unconscious in the guest room, and Olivia had refused to leave her side. But she couldn't ignore the feeling that something important was happening tonight. She had overheard servants and staff whispering about a grand announcement, something about Alexander naming his heir. A part of her already knew what was coming. It would be Mia, his adopted daughter. It had always been Mia. Olivia's stomach twisted as she thought about it. Mia, the girl who had been living in the Vance mansion, who had seamlessly fit into their world, while Olivia was the outsider. Mia was perfect in every way, with her polished exterior, her ability to charm everyone around her, and the way she looked at Alexander, like she was already the queen of the world. Olivia couldn't even imagine how she could compete with that. She wasn't a part of this world. She wasn't one of them. But then, as she glanced up, she saw Alexander at the front of the ballroom, his tall figure standing in front of the crowd. He was poised, confident, every inch the billionaire he was. He was about to make the announcement that would change everything. This was her chance. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest as she tightened her grip on the worn fabric of her dress. She couldn't let this moment pass by. She couldn't let Mia win. With determination coursing through her, Olivia took a deep breath and stepped forward, slipping through the crowd, unnoticed by most. She had no plan, no clear idea of how she would get to Alexander, but she knew that now was the time. She made her way toward the stage where Alexander was preparing to speak, her body moving on autopilot. She wasn't going to be ignored anymore. She wasn't going to let Mia take everything from her. As she neared the front of the room, she spotted 2 security guards standing near the side. They were watching her closely, as though they knew she didn't belong. The moment she stepped into their line of sight, one of the guards raised his hand. "Hey," he said, his voice gruff. "Where do you think you're going?" Olivia stopped dead in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. She had been caught. She wasn't sure how to explain herself, how to tell them that she was supposed to be here, that she was part of the family. She wasn't sure they would believe her. But before she could respond, a loud voice interrupted. "Is there a problem here?" Alexander's voice rang out across the ballroom, drawing everyone's attention. Olivia's heart skipped a beat as she turned to see him striding toward her, his gaze narrowing as he scanned her from head to toe. He had no idea who she was. Not really. The security guard stepped aside, and Alexander's gaze flicked between Olivia and the guards. "She's not supposed to be here," one of the guards muttered under his breath, clearly uncomfortable. "I see," Alexander said coldly, his gaze never leaving Olivia. "Leave us." The guards hesitated for a moment before nodding and backing away, but Olivia could feel the tension in the air. She was standing in front of him now, just a few feet away. Alexander's presence was overpowering, and for a moment, she felt like she was suffocating. "Olivia," he said, his voice laced with frustration, "what are you doing here?" She tried to swallow the lump in her throat but couldn't. "I need to speak with you." He looked at her with something that could have been annoyance, but there was something else in his eyes, something hard to read. "Now is not the time. We're about to begin the announcement. I'm not in the mood for interruptions." Olivia's fingers trembled, but she forced herself to hold steady. "You're making a mistake." He raised an eyebrow, clearly unamused. "A mistake? What are you talking about?" She could feel the eyes of the room on her, the weight of their judgment pressing in, but she didn't care. She had to do this. You're about to name Mia as your heir, right? Olivia's voice was steady, but it wavered with emotion. But I'm your real daughter. I'm the one who belongs here. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and Olivia could feel the heat of their stares. She wasn't sure how it was possible, but in that moment, she felt like every eye in the room was scrutinizing her, judging her, waiting for her to fail. Alexander's expression hardened, his jaw clenching. What are you trying to say, Olivia? Before she could respond, a loud click interrupted the tense silence. Everyone turned toward the long table in the center of the room, where a silver pen lay on a pristine white tablecloth. It was a ceremonial pen, designed to symbolize the final step of an agreement, of a declaration. Alexander was about to sign a document, something that would confirm Mia as his heir, something that would change everything. But as Alexander walked toward the table, the pen, seemingly of its own accord, rolled across the table and came to a sudden stop. The sound of it skittering across the surface was loud, drawing attention. Everyone in the room looked at the pen, confused, but Alexander simply shrugged it off. It's nothing, he muttered, but there was a tightness in his voice that Olivia couldn't ignore. He reached for the pen again, but it refused to move. The pen tipped over, rolling once more, as if it had a life of its own. The room fell into an awkward silence, the strange malfunction of the pen catching everyone off guard. For a brief moment, Olivia could have sworn she saw a flicker of something like surprise or maybe even fear, in Alexander's eyes. He looked at the pen, then back at her. She knew, then, that this was her chance. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. I'm your daughter, Alexander. I'm not Mia. You've been lied to. I'm the one who belongs with you. Not her. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. Alexander's gaze fixed on her, and for a moment, she thought he might dismiss her again, just like he had done before. But instead, something shifted in his expression, a crack in the wall he had built around himself. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice quieter now, more uncertain. Before Olivia could respond, the door to the ballroom opened with a sharp creak. Helena entered, holding something in her hand, a file, its contents clearly marked. She walked swiftly to the front, where Alexander stood, and handed the file to him. These are the DNA results, Helena said, her voice steady but firm. Olivia is your biological daughter. Mia is not. The words hung in the air like a bombshell, shattering the silence. The room buzzed with shock, disbelief, and confusion. Alexander stared at the file in his hands, his eyes flicking between the papers and Olivia, his face drained of color. He couldn't seem to find his voice. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Olivia stood there, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. This was the moment she had fought for. She had told the truth, and now the truth was laid bare before everyone. The pen, still on the table, lay perfectly still now. As if it knew, somehow, that everything had just changed. The atmosphere in the ballroom was heavy with disbelief. No one spoke for a long, drawn-out moment. The chatter, the hum of conversation, had fallen silent as the weight of Helena's words sank in. Olivia could feel the eyes of the entire room on her, judging, questioning, wondering if what had just been revealed was real. Even Alexander's once confident stance faltered, the file trembling slightly in his hands. The DNA results, proof of her heritage, were now in front of him. But for Olivia, the silence was deafening. Her heart raced in her chest, the rhythm erratic, as she stood there in front of everyone. It wasn't just the shock of the revelation that hit her, it was the fear. The fear of being rejected again. The fear that Alexander would somehow deny the truth, the cold reality of her existence, and choose to keep Mia in the position of his heir, despite everything. Her eyes flicked from Alexander to Mia, who stood across the room. The smugness that had always been there, the knowing, possessive look, was gone now. Instead, Mia's face was pale, her expression one of pure panic, as if everything she had worked so hard for was suddenly slipping through her fingers. Alexander took a shaky breath and finally spoke, his voice low, the weight of the words he was about to say settling in. Helena, are you sure? Olivia's breath caught in her throat. His voice was strained, fragile. Helena didn't hesitate. I had the tests done at 2 separate facilities, Alexander. They confirm what we already knew. Olivia is your biological daughter. Mia. She paused, looking at Mia, her gaze cool but firm. Mia is not. Mia stepped forward, her expression faltering for just a second before she quickly masked it with a practiced smile. This is absurd, she said, her voice thick with forced confidence. You think I'm some imposter? She glanced at the crowd, willing them to side with her. This is a misunderstanding, a lie. I've been your daughter for years, father. I've always been here, always loved you. I'm the one you know. I'm the one you trust. But her words rang hollow. Olivia could see it, the cracks in Mia's facade were starting to show. There was a tremor in her voice, a slight quiver in her hands. The truth was unraveling, and Mia didn't know how to stop it. Alexander's eyes were locked on the DNA results now, his expression unreadable, his face pale. He seemed frozen, as if the weight of this revelation was too much to bear. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he looked up at Olivia. I don't know what to say, he whispered, the words barely audible. Olivia felt a sharp, painful twist in her chest. You don't have to say anything, she said, her voice trembling, but fierce. You have to believe me. I'm your daughter. Not her. Mia's eyes flashed with anger at the implication. You think I'm just going to let you walk in here and take everything from me? She hissed, her composure cracking. I've been by your side for years. I'm the one who's been loyal. I'm the one who's been here. You think I'll let this little girl tear it all down? Olivia took a step toward her, the fire of her anger rising, but it was Helena who intervened, stepping between them. Mia, enough. This is not about loyalty. This is about the truth. The words seemed to hit Mia like a slap. She stood frozen, her face pale, as if the ground beneath her was crumbling away. For the first time, Olivia saw a flicker of real fear in Mia's eyes. Mia's voice faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. No. This is wrong. I am your daughter, Alexander. I've been here for you. Don't do this. Don't let her win. But it was too late. The crowd was murmuring now, the whispers rising in intensity. The truth had been laid bare, and Alexander could no longer deny it. The evidence was irrefutable. Olivia felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment. She had fought for this. She had fought for a place, for a future, and for the truth to come to light. But she wasn't sure if she was ready for what came next. Was it enough? Was she enough? Alexander turned slowly, his gaze fixed on Olivia. His eyes, which had been full of authority, control, and power, were now filled with something softer, something Olivia couldn't quite name. Regret? Sorrow? Perhaps a mixture of both. Olivia, His voice trailed off as he ran a hand through his hair, the weight of the situation clearly overwhelming him. I've made so many mistakes. I don't even know where to begin. Olivia's heart twisted painfully in her chest. She had always dreamed of this moment, of standing in front of Alexander, telling him the truth, showing him who she was. But now that it was happening, it felt different. She wanted his acceptance, yes, but more than that, she wanted him to see her. To see her for who she truly was, not just as a pawn in a family drama or a piece in a game of power. You made a mistake, Alexander, she said quietly, her voice trembling. But that doesn't change who I am. I'm still your daughter. There was a long silence, and for a brief moment, it felt like everything hung in the balance. The fate of the family, the truth of who Olivia was, it was all resting on the edge of this moment. Finally, Alexander spoke again, his voice rough, as though each word took effort to say. I never knew, he admitted, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and disbelief. I never knew about you, Olivia. I didn't know. And now. He swallowed, his gaze dropping to the floor, unable to meet her eyes. Now, I don't know how to fix this. How do I undo all the years we lost? Olivia's throat tightened, the weight of his words pressing down on her. You can't undo it. But you can make things right from now on. She paused, her heart pounding. We can try. Together. Helena stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Alexander, it's time to let go of the past. You can't change it. But you can change how you move forward. Olivia deserves to have a place in this family. She deserves to be a part of this world, and so does Ellie. For a moment, Alexander stood silent, his head bent, his face a mask of turmoil. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he raised his eyes to meet Olivia's. "I don't know what I can offer you," he said, his voice strained. "I don't know if I can ever make up for the years we've lost. But I want to try." "I'll try, Olivia." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes at the sound of those words. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to accept her so easily, but in that moment, the wall she had spent so long building around her heart began to crack. For the first time, she could see a way forward, a path that might lead to healing. "That's all I need," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't need perfection. I just need the truth. And I need you to be there. For me. For my mom." Alexander nodded slowly, his face filled with a new kind of resolve. "You'll have me. You'll have us both." It was then that Olivia realized, for the first time, that she had a family. A real one. Not just blood and names, but people who, despite their flaws, would fight for her. They would fight for her mother. And together, they would make things right. The tension in the room slowly dissolved, the whispers fading into a quiet hum of disbelief and acceptance. It was over. Mia's reign, her claims to power, her manipulation, they were all exposed for what they were. And now, a new chapter would begin. Olivia's heart swelled with a strange, bittersweet relief. She had found her place. She had found her family. But the journey was far from over. There were still lies to unravel, still battles to fight. And more than anything, Olivia knew one thing for certain: she would never stop fighting for the truth. The night was cold, the wind cutting through the trees like a blade, but Olivia felt none of it. Her thoughts were consumed with the events that had unfolded in the Vance mansion, the DNA test, Alexander's tentative acceptance, the shifting of allegiances. For the first time in her life, she felt the faintest stirrings of hope. But hope, as Olivia knew all too well, was a fragile thing. She walked the halls of the mansion late that evening, unable to sleep. The world outside had already gone quiet, the house now steeped in the kind of silence that followed great upheavals, like the calm after a storm. But in that quiet, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something else was wrong. Something was brewing beneath the surface. She could feel it. As she passed the grand staircase, she saw a light flickering from the end of the hall. Curious, Olivia approached, her footsteps muffled against the rich carpets. When she reached the source of the light, she was surprised to find a door ajar, just enough for her to hear voices. Not loud voices, but the kind of voices that were heavy with secrecy. She stopped, her heart beating in her chest. The voices belonged to Alexander and Helena. She didn't want to eavesdrop, but something inside her pushed her forward, urging her to listen. "I know what you're thinking," Helena's voice was low but clear. "You think she's after your money, after everything you've built. But you're wrong. Olivia is your daughter, Alexander. She deserves this. She deserves a place here." Alexander's voice was quieter, strained. "I don't know how to do this, Helena. I've spent so many years believing one thing. How do I make up for all of it? How do I fix what's been broken?" Olivia felt a pang of guilt listening to them. She had no right to overhear such intimate conversations. But the words made her heart ache. She understood the weight of what Alexander was saying. He was struggling. Struggling with the years he had lost, with the family he thought he had. "I understand your pain," Helena continued, her voice filled with a kind of soft understanding. "But Olivia has already suffered enough. It's time to move forward." Olivia felt the sting of their words settle in. She knew they were right. She had suffered, for so long, without a father, without a place to call home. But now she had to fight for her place in this new world, for a future that didn't feel like it had been handed to her, but earned. She stepped back, her mind spinning, but as she turned to leave, her foot caught on something. A small, metallic sound echoed through the hall, and in that moment, everything changed. The door to the guest room, where her mother lay, slammed open, and before Olivia could react, two figures appeared in the hallway. Victoria. And Mia. The sight of them together, their faces twisted in anger, sent a chill down Olivia's spine. Mia's face was set in a sneer, her eyes narrowed with pure malice, while Victoria looked like a woman on the edge, wild and unhinged. "What are you doing here?" Olivia's voice was hoarse, her hand instinctively reaching for the door to her mother's room. She didn't know why, but it felt like she had to protect her, protect Ellie, the only family she had left. Victoria stepped forward, her lips curling into a smile that felt more like a threat. "We're here to make sure you don't do something foolish, Olivia," she said, her tone icy. "You've already caused enough trouble. Do you think Alexander will ever truly accept you? You're just a reminder of a past he's trying to forget." Olivia's breath caught in her chest. The venom in Victoria's words was palpable. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way she spoke, like a predator circling its prey, trying to find the right moment to strike. Mia, standing behind Victoria, watched Olivia with narrowed eyes. She stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with a mix of contempt and fear. "You don't belong here," Mia said, her voice shaking slightly. "You'll never be a part of this family. I won't let you take what's mine." Olivia felt a surge of anger rise in her chest. She had heard enough. She wasn't going to let Mia or Victoria scare her anymore. She was stronger than that. She had fought too long to give up now. "I'm not taking anything from you, Mia," Olivia shot back, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "But you've been lying to everyone, pretending to be something you're not. You've stolen everything, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth." Victoria's eyes darkened, and she took a step toward Olivia, her lips curling into a smile that was all too familiar now, cold and calculating. "Oh, Olivia," she said softly, her voice a sickeningly sweet whisper. "You don't understand, do you? You're just a pawn in a much bigger game. A game that's already been played." The words hit Olivia like a punch to the gut. She didn't know what Victoria meant, but something in her gut told her it wasn't good. Before she could react, Victoria grabbed her arm, her grip strong and unyielding. Olivia tried to pull away, but Victoria's strength was surprising. "Let go of me," she cried, struggling, but the older woman's grip only tightened. Victoria laughed, a sound that made Olivia's skin crawl. "You really think you can just waltz in here and take everything? You're not even supposed to be alive." The words stopped Olivia's heart. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, panic rising in her chest. Victoria's smile widened, and for the first time, Olivia saw the true malice behind it. "You think you're some innocent little girl, don't you? But you're not. You were never supposed to be here, Olivia. Your mother. She wasn't supposed to survive. I made sure of that." The world tilted beneath Olivia's feet. "What do you mean?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. Victoria's eyes gleamed with an almost sadistic satisfaction. "Ellie wasn't the woman Alexander fell in love with," she said. "I was. And I had to get rid of her. So I did. I pushed her off that cliff years ago. And I made sure she never came back. But she survived. She survived, and now you think you can just come in here and take what's mine? You think Alexander will ever accept you after everything I've done?" The word sent a shockwave through Olivia's chest. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She had known, on some level, that there was darkness in Victoria. But she had never imagined this, never imagined that the woman who had spent so many years controlling her life had been capable of such cruelty. You pushed her off the cliff?" Olivia whispered, her voice cracking. Victoria nodded slowly, a wicked smile curling on her lips. "It wasn't just the cliff. It was the slow poisoning, too. I did it all. And no one ever suspected me. Because I was always so good at playing the part." Olivia staggered back, her head spinning. The woman who had taken her mother from her, who had stolen her family, was standing in front of her, admitting to everything. The truth was worse than anything she had ever imagined. But as the cold realization settled in, a new kind of resolve began to build within her. Victoria was powerful. She had manipulated everyone, including Alexander. But now, she was exposed. And Olivia wasn't about to let her get away with it. Suddenly, the door burst open with a loud crash, and two figures rushed in, Alexander and Helena. "Get away from her." Alexander's voice was a roar, his eyes wild with fury as he grabbed Victoria's arm, yanking her away from Olivia. "What have you done?" Olivia's heart raced as she turned to look at Alexander. For the first time, she saw the raw pain in his eyes, the shock of everything he had just learned. She admitted it," Olivia gasped, her voice shaking. "She pushed my mom off the cliff. She poisoned her. She tried to kill her." Victoria struggled in Alexander's grip, but he held her firmly. I know, he said, his voice trembling with rage. I know. And I'm going to make sure you pay for everything you've done. Olivia watched as Alexander turned to his grandmother, his face etched with disbelief. Helena, we need to get her out of here. Now. Helena nodded, her face grim. We will, Alexander. I'll call the authorities. As Victoria was dragged away, Olivia felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The truth had finally come to light. But the weight of it, the weight of all the years of lies, betrayal, and manipulation, was too much to bear. And yet, as Alexander turned to her, his eyes filled with a deep regret, something else stirred within her. Hope. The battle wasn't over. But for the first time in her life, Olivia had a chance to reclaim what had always been hers, her family. The cold weight of truth still hung heavy in the air as Olivia stood in the grand hallway of the Vance mansion, her heart pounding in her chest. Alexander had retreated to his study to process the shocking revelations, his face pale with a mixture of disbelief and fury. Helena had gone to make the necessary calls, ensuring that Victoria and her accomplices were handed over to the authorities. For the moment, the mansion had gone eerily silent. The house felt different now, like the very walls were trembling under the strain of the secrets they had held for so long. Olivia couldn't shake the images of Victoria's cold confession from her mind. The woman who had poisoned her mother, the woman who had pushed Ellie off a cliff, the woman who had torn apart their family with every manipulative action she took, she was gone now. But the damage was done. The lies, the years of control, the pain, they couldn't be erased with a simple confession or the swift hand of justice. The real reckoning had only just begun. As she paced the hallway, her fingers clenching and unclenching, Olivia found herself drawn to the large windows that looked out over the mansion's grounds. The gardens were bathed in moonlight, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. The world outside seemed so peaceful, so calm, in stark contrast to the storm that had just ravaged her family. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts, and before she could respond, Helena entered, her face serious but softened by concern. Olivia, she said gently, her voice carrying the weight of everything that had transpired. How are you holding up? Olivia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned toward Helena, her heart still in turmoil. I don't know what to think, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It's all so much. I never imagined any of this. Helena's gaze softened as she stepped closer, her arms crossed in a protective, maternal gesture. You've been through more than most could ever understand, she said, her words grounded in empathy. But you are strong. Stronger than you even know. The older woman's eyes were filled with a wisdom that came only with age, a quiet acceptance that seemed to embrace the storm of emotions Olivia was feeling. But as much as Helena tried to comfort her, Olivia still couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was missing. I don't know how to move forward, Olivia confessed, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know how to trust him, how to trust any of this. Helena nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. I understand, she said softly. But, Olivia, you have to remember that it's not just about the past. It's about what happens next. You've been through so much already. You've fought for your place here, and now you need to decide how you want to move forward, with Alexander, with your mother, with your life. Her words hit Olivia harder than expected. It was true. She had fought. She had fought for everything she had. And though the battle had been long and painful, she had finally found herself standing in a place where she could reclaim her future. The question now was what to do with it. The sound of a door opening behind her made Olivia spin around. Alexander stepped into the hallway, his face set in lines of quiet determination, though the exhaustion in his eyes was clear. He looked at her, and for a long moment, they simply stood there, across the distance of the hallway, silently assessing each other. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and thick with emotion. Olivia, I owe you an apology. His words hit Olivia like a physical blow. She hadn't expected an apology, not from someone like him. Not after everything that had happened. I can't imagine what you've gone through, Alexander continued, his voice tight. The things you've had to endure because of me, because of the lies I allowed to continue. I should have seen it. I should have fought for you, for your mother. But I didn't. I was blind. Olivia swallowed, her throat tight. She wasn't sure what to say. She had dreamed of this moment, dreamed of Alexander acknowledging her, accepting her, apologizing. but now that it was here, she felt conflicted. A part of her wanted to shout at him, to demand that he fix everything. Another part of her just wanted to walk away, to retreat back into the world she had built on her own, far away from the mess that was her family. But instead of speaking, she just looked at him, waiting. She had already made up her mind about one thing: words weren't enough. She needed actions. She needed to see how far he was willing to go to make things right. Alexander seemed to understand. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, he looked like a man who had been weighed down by guilt for far too long. "I don't know how to make amends for what I've done, Olivia," he said quietly. "I can't undo the years I've lost with you. But I can try. I can try to be the father you deserve." Olivia took a deep breath, her heart aching in a way she hadn't expected. She had spent so long yearning for him to say something like that, but now that he had, she wasn't sure how to feel. Could she trust him? Could she trust anyone? But in the end, the only answer was the one she had always known: she had to make the choice. She had to decide what kind of future she wanted, even if that meant taking risks. "Try," she said softly. "But you have to mean it. No more lies. No more secrets." Alexander nodded, his eyes filled with sincerity. "I swear it, Olivia. No more lies." The quiet of the night seemed to settle around them then, the tension between them shifting into something new, something fragile, but possible. The pieces of the puzzle were still scattered across the floor, but for the first time, Olivia felt like maybe, just maybe, she could start putting them back together. Helena, standing quietly off to the side, watched the exchange with a quiet satisfaction. She knew that this was only the beginning, that the road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles. But she also knew that they had taken the first step toward healing. And that, at least, was something to hold on to. "We have a lot to rebuild," Helena said softly, stepping toward them. "But it's not impossible. Not if we work together." Olivia looked at her mother's mother, at Alexander, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that this family, this broken, imperfect family, could heal. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time. But they had time. And for the first time in her life, Olivia was ready to fight for it. Meanwhile, in the distant corners of the mansion, Charles and Margaret, Olivia's grandparents, were grappling with their own regret. They had failed their daughter, Ellie, and their granddaughter, Olivia. They had believed Victoria's lies, allowed her to manipulate them, to poison their family. Now, standing in the shadows of their own guilt, they knew they had no one to blame but themselves. And as the realization settled in, they knew they had no right to ask for forgiveness. Not from Ellie. Not from Olivia. They would have to prove they were worthy of it. The weight of their failure pressed down on them, but even so, they knew one thing: their path to redemption would be long. The sterile, cool scent of the hospital was unmistakable, cutting through the air like a needle threading through fabric. Olivia stood by the large windows of the hospital room, her gaze fixed on the view of the city below, the lights twinkling far off in the distance. The noise of the world seemed muted from here, distant, insignificant in the face of what had happened. What was happening? Her fingers rested lightly on the windowsill, her nails tracing the cool surface as her mind replayed the events of the past few days. After the confrontation with Victoria, the authorities had arrived to take her into custody. The police had found evidence of her treachery, evidence that confirmed what Olivia had always suspected. But despite all of that, despite the end of Victoria's reign of terror, the hardest part was still before them. Ellie, her mother, was still unconscious. The doctors had been blunt, as doctors often were. The chance of Ellie waking up from her coma was slim. A miracle was the word they used, and Olivia hated it. It made everything feel so out of control, as if her mother's fate was in the hands of a fickle, indifferent universe. They didn't believe in miracles. But Olivia had learned something in the past weeks: she didn't need anyone else to believe in the impossible. She would make her own miracles. She had spent days by her mother's side, only leaving when she had to, trying not to notice how pale Ellie's face had become, how fragile her body seemed beneath the thin white sheets. Every day, she spoke to her mother, about the things that had happened, about the truth that had finally come to light, about how much she had missed her, how much she had fought for her. She spoke about Alexander, about the future they could still have if only Ellie could wake up, if only she could hear her. But nothing had changed. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor in the corner was the only sound in the room, soft and constant. It seemed to taunt her, reminding her of the silence that enveloped her mother. She had been unconscious for so long. Ellie had fought so hard to stay alive, and now, it felt like they were both holding their breath, waiting for something they couldn't control. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, leaning her forehead against the cool glass, allowing the tears to come. For a moment, she couldn't stop them, the emotions that had been bottled up for so long poured out, mixing with the guilt, the anger, the sorrow. She had fought for so much, but none of it would matter if her mother didn't wake up. None of it. A soft cough broke her reverie, and she turned quickly. Alexander stood in the doorway, looking hesitant, his face drawn with the weight of the last few days. He hadn't left her side, despite the fact that his presence in the hospital had drawn the attention of the press. The media was obsessed with the story of the Vance heir, the long-lost daughter, the heiress to the fortune, the miracle child. But none of it mattered to Olivia. Not when her mother was still lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. Alexander's voice was soft as he spoke. Olivia, I know it's hard. I know it feels like we're losing her. He took a step forward, his eyes searching hers, filled with a raw kind of sadness. But we can't give up hope. You have to believe she can hear you. That she knows we're here for her. That she's not alone. Olivia didn't respond immediately. She wanted to, but the word stuck in her throat, lodged somewhere deep inside her. She had heard the doctors, she had listened to their warnings. They didn't think Ellie would wake up. They had given her a limited time. The chances were growing slimmer by the day. But as much as she tried to push it away, something deep inside her whispered that it wasn't over. That she wasn't going to lose her mother, not like this, not after everything they had fought through. She turned to Alexander, her voice shaky but steady. I've been talking to her, she said, her hands gripping the edge of the windowsill as she spoke. I tell her everything. Everything that's happened, everything I want to say to her. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. She's not waking up. Alexander stepped closer to her, his presence warm, grounding. He reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder, his fingers pressing lightly against her skin. She's stronger than you think, Olivia. She's fought so hard for you. Don't give up on her now. Olivia nodded, but her mind was still racing. She had said everything she could say. What if it wasn't enough? What if there was nothing left to do but wait? The door to the room opened, and the sound of soft footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Helena entered quietly, her expression unreadable as she made her way to Olivia's side. There was a certain stillness about her, an unspoken understanding that made Olivia feel like she was being held in a delicate balance. For all the warmth and comfort Helena had given her in the past, there was something infinitely more profound in the way the older woman approached her now. How is she? Helena asked gently, her voice filled with the kind of tenderness that only a grandmother could carry. Olivia didn't answer right away. She felt the lump in her throat rise again, a mixture of fear and frustration. How could she answer? How could she explain the feeling of helplessness that was gnawing at her from the inside out? Before she could speak, there was a sudden change. A shift in the air that made everything stop for just a moment. It was a subtle thing, hard to notice, but it was there. The rhythm of the heart monitor changed, the beeping slowing and then quickening again in a way that made Olivia's heart race. Olivia? Alexander's voice was full of surprise, his hand on her arm as he turned toward her. What's happening? Olivia's gaze snapped back to her mother. The rise and fall of Ellie's chest was slightly steadier now. The color in her cheeks, once pale, had returned, just a hint, but enough to make Olivia's heart leap. She took a hesitant step forward, her breath catching in her throat. Mom, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Mom, it's me. It's Olivia. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing changed. And then, a soft groan escaped from Ellie's lips, a faint, almost imperceptible sound. Olivia's breath hitched, and she took another step closer, her hand reaching out, trembling, toward her mother. Mom, please, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please come back to me. We need you. I need you. The sound that followed wasn't a groan, but something else, something more purposeful. Ellie's fingers twitched slightly against the sheets. Alexander and Helena were silent, their eyes wide in disbelief as Olivia moved closer, her voice shaking with hope. Mom, please, open your eyes. I'm here. I've been waiting for you. We've all been waiting. The room seemed to hold its breath. The beeping of the heart monitor quickened, louder now, more pronounced, as if the pulse of life was returning to Ellie. Olivia reached for her mother's hand, gently squeezing it, and then, a flutter. A shift. Ellie's eyelids trembled, and for the first time in so long, Olivia thought she saw her mother's eyes flutter open, blinking slowly in the dim light. "Mom?" Olivia gasped, her voice cracking, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mom, are you awake?" Ellie's gaze fluttered toward her daughter, her eyes unfocused at first, but slowly, they began to clear, as though she were seeing Olivia for the first time in what felt like forever. There was confusion in her expression, but beneath that confusion, there was something else, a flicker of recognition, a spark of life that had been dormant for so long. And then, slowly, Ellie's lips parted, her voice a soft rasp. "Olivia. Is that you?" Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes, and she bent forward, her voice full of relief and love. "Yes, Mom. It's me. I'm here. You're not alone anymore." Ellie's hand, weak and trembling, reached out toward Olivia, and for the first time in months, her fingers closed around her daughter's, the contact a thread of hope, of connection, of a miracle realized. The room was silent but for the sound of their breaths, slow, steady, in sync once more. And in that moment, Olivia knew with everything in her that her mother had come back to her. The impossible had happened. The Vance mansion, once filled with tension, secrets, and betrayals, now felt different. The oppressive weight of the past was beginning to lift, and in its place, a fragile new beginning was taking root. The halls, once echoing with silence and whispered deceptions, were now alive with the quiet murmur of healing. Every step that Olivia took felt lighter. Every breath she drew held the promise of something new, something whole. Ellie was awake. Her mother, her rock, her heart, had returned to her, her spirit unwavering despite the scars that still marred the past. Olivia couldn't stop looking at her, as if fearing the moment she would wake up and the fragile dream would shatter. But Ellie was there, alive and strong, sitting up in the hospital bed beside her, her eyes filled with love and a sorrow that mirrored her daughter's own. For days, Olivia had barely left her mother's side. She had spoken to her, shared the pieces of their fractured world, and most of all, reassured Ellie that everything was going to be okay. It had been a slow process. Ellie's body had been through so much, and her mind was still catching up, struggling to reconcile the world she had once known with the chaos that had followed her fall from the cliff. But the bond they shared, the love between mother and daughter, had never faltered, and it was that love that had carried them through the darkness. As Olivia sat beside her mother in the hospital room that morning, she couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened. The lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, it was all still fresh in her mind. But there was something else, something that had been growing within her for weeks now. It wasn't just the truth of who she was that mattered anymore, it was the choice she had made to fight for her family. To fight for Ellie. And now, with the truth finally out, there was nothing more to fight for except the future. "Mom," Olivia said quietly, her voice filled with affection as she brushed a stray lock of hair away from Ellie's face. "Are you feeling okay today?" Ellie's lips parted, her voice still hoarse from weeks of disuse, but strong with emotion. "I'm getting there," she replied, her eyes lifting to meet Olivia's. "It's hard to believe all of this. Hard to believe it's real." Olivia smiled, her heart swelling with relief and joy. "It's real, Mom. It's all real." Ellie's gaze softened, her hand reaching out to take Olivia's. The warmth of her touch sent a ripple of peace through Olivia's chest. "I don't know how to say it, Olivia," Ellie murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to make up for all the time we lost. I'm so sorry for what you went through. For what I couldn't protect you from." Olivia squeezed her mother's hand tightly. "You don't need to apologize, Mom. You never gave up on me. You were always there, even when you couldn't be. And now you're here, and that's all that matters." The words hung between them, tender and heavy with the unspoken truth that everything had changed. They would never be the same as they were before. But that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. After all, what mattered was not the past, but the future. And for the first time in a long while, Olivia felt the hope that she had spent years searching for, hope that one day, they would all be able to move forward together. In the doorway, the sound of footsteps drew Olivia's attention. She turned to see Alexander standing there, his face softer now, less burdened than before. He had been a constant presence in the hospital, always there when she needed him, always there for Ellie. For the first time, she saw the man he truly was, the father, the man who had fallen so far, but who was now doing everything in his power to make things right. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice hesitant, but hopeful. Olivia gave him a small smile, stepping aside to let him enter. "Of course. We were just talking." Alexander's eyes softened as he looked at Ellie. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. Ellie managed a weak but warm smile. "Better," she said softly. "Better every day." Alexander nodded, taking a seat at the side of the bed. He hesitated for a moment before speaking again, his voice low and earnest. "Ellie, I want you to know. I'm so sorry. I don't have the words for it, but I owe you so much more than I can ever give. I failed you. I failed Olivia. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to undo the pain I caused, but I want to try. I want to try to be the man you both deserve." The sincerity in his voice struck Olivia like a wave. She had heard the words, but they didn't feel like empty promises. There was a weight behind them, a weight of regret and remorse that wasn't just lip service. He was finally seeing the truth of what he had lost, of what he had failed to protect. Ellie looked at him, her eyes filled with a depth of emotion that Olivia couldn't quite decipher. For a moment, they were silent, and Olivia couldn't help but wonder if this was the first step toward true healing, for both of them. Finally, Ellie broke the silence. "I don't know what happened between us, Alexander. But I do know this: we can't change the past. We can only choose to move forward. And I want to move forward, with you. I want us to build something real for Olivia. For all of us." The words, so simple and so profound, felt like the lifting of a weight Olivia had carried for so long. It was as if, with one sentence, Ellie had offered forgiveness, not just to Alexander, but to herself. It was a new beginning, not just for her, but for the family they had always been, despite the cracks in their foundation. Alexander nodded, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I don't deserve it, Ellie, but I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make up for the time I wasted. For the mistakes I made." Olivia watched the exchange between her mother and Alexander, a soft warmth spreading in her chest. This was what she had fought for. This was what they had all fought for. A chance to rebuild, a chance to heal, a chance to finally be a family. It wouldn't be easy. There would still be days of doubt, days when the shadows of the past would try to creep in. But they would face it together, as a family. For the first time in her life, Olivia felt something deep and unshakable settle inside her: peace. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Ellie's recovery was slow but steady, and Olivia found herself by her side more than ever. They had all come together, in the way families do when they've weathered storms and come out the other side. Grandmother Helena was a constant presence, always offering words of wisdom, always offering love. The Vance family, though scarred, was beginning to repair the damage that had been done. Even Charles and Margaret, Olivia's grandparents, found their way back into the fold, though it was clear that their redemption would take time. There was no easy path to forgiveness, no simple way to make up for the years they had lost. But they were trying, and that was enough. Alexander, now fully committed to being the father he had always wanted to be, worked tirelessly to rebuild his relationship with Olivia. He had learned from his mistakes, and though there would always be cracks in their foundation, he was determined to fill them, to make sure that Olivia knew she was loved, that she had a place in his world. A place that was truly hers. And so, over the next few months, the family grew stronger, not just because of the wealth they had, or the power that came with their name, but because of the love they shared. A love that had been tested by time, by pain, and by lies, but a love that, in the end, had prevailed. As the sun set one evening, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Olivia stood by the windows of the Vance mansion once more, her hands resting on the cool glass. She had a family now, one that was flawed, one that had been broken, but one that was whole again, in its own way. And that, she realized, was enough.